She had no recollection of this place, and how she even got there.
After spending nearly 2 hours exploring a preview build of Somber Echoes, an upcoming Metroidvania from developer Rock Pocket Games, I walked away feeling optimistic about its chances to stand out in a crowded field of similar titles. Though my short time with it didn't lead me to believe it'll be wildly inventive, its foreboding atmosphere, solid combat, and mobility-based exploration has left me feeling eager to see more.
Her grip tightened around the weather hilt. Her combat instinct writhed. If this forsaken place wanted to keep her a prisoner, her blade it would now taste.
Somber Echoes takes place entirely on the Atromitos, an abandoned spaceship left in the aftermath of some type of cataclysmic event. Players take on the role of Adestria, who has been tasked with searching the vessel for her twin sister, Harmonia, and stopping her from destroying the universe. Though the opening hours are light on dialogue and exposition, there's a compelling blend of sci-fi and Greek mythology at play here. During the preview, I ran into reimagined Greek gods like Ares and Hephaestus, and I imagine there are quite a lot more to meet throughout the rest of the campaign. The extent of their impact on the story is yet to be seen, but color me intrigued to see how the team will weave Greek tragedies into an apocalyptic space opera.
Ares, the captain of the Atromitos Watch, as stilled and vigilant as she remembered.
Of course, you can't really have a Metroidvania without significant amounts of exploration, and Somber Echoes is off to a great start overall in that regard. Very early in the preview, I found the Aether Lantern ability, which appears to be the core mobility mechanic in the game. This allowed me to enter a ball of energy and then select the direction I wanted to eject. While I could only use this ability once per landing during the section of Somber Echoes I played, a tooltip in the menu promised more Aether cores could be found to allow for additional uses. And naturally, with vertical exploration being one of the driving forces of the experience, there were tons of areas I couldn't reach yet due to not having these eventual improvements. I'm looking forward to propelling myself to some of those just out of reach areas once I'm powered up enough to perform multiple jumps in the full version of the game. But even with the limited mobility in the preview, there were a variety of secrets to find around the derelict spaceship. I examined each room thoroughly and found plenty of fake walls and clever shortcuts, as well as some unusual dead ends that seem like they could be home to additional collectibles or upgrades in the final build. With 7 districts planned for players to explore, I suspect there will be hours and hours of interweaving rooms to have fun searching through. And a much appreciated ability to name the rooms you visited already should make it considerably easier to remember points of interest you want to return to later.
The voice is urged.
Meanwhile, combat in Somber Echoes is a simple but satisfying affair as well, at least so far. Most enemies only had a few attacks in their arsenal, but careful attention was needed to identify how to react to each of them. Certain attacks were unblockable, and with no roll or dash to avoid them, parrying was the main option available to avoid taking damage. I did find that using the Aether Lantern to hurl myself over foes was effective at repositioning out of a tight spot, but getting hit mid-animation interrupted my plans a few times. Still, being punished for trying to reposition my character was something I actually kind of liked. Some of these enemy encounters took place in tight spots that really forced me to consider how best to prepare to take them on, making otherwise straightforward fights feel more tense. Seeing creepy monstrosities rushing toward me from both sides, with environmental hazards nearby and limited space to move in, was a rush, and I'm looking forward to more of that kind of level design in the full campaign. Speaking of level design, there's some great environmental storytelling in the Atromitos' detailed backgrounds, which do an excellent job of selling its mythology meets technology aesthetic.
Pulsing with anticipation, the voices pressed her onwards. Salvation was within reach.
But at least in the areas I explored in the beginning of my demo, the vessel was exceedingly dark. As much as I dug this dreary and desolate vibe, the limited color palette of orange and red, coupled with some samey locations, caused a lot of the screens to blend together after a while. But more concerning is how the darkness, combined with visually busy environments, occasionally made it difficult to make out certain on-screen elements or define what was and wasn't playable space.
Groaning and shying, awakened from a slumber deep.
A time or two, I found myself jumping toward a platform only to realize it was in the foreground, which has a way of making you feel especially dumb, and other times, some small ranged enemies blended into similarly colored lights so well that I didn't even notice them until they had damaged me. I would sometimes even briefly overlook something interactable that just looked like part of the background clutter.
Terror incarnate, Adrestia was forewarned by the ethereal whispers.
These issues were never so frequent or intense that it ruined my enjoyment though, and they largely appear to be intentional design choices meant to invoke a sense of constant dread and claustrophobia. I'll admit, this somewhat disorientating direction hasn't fully clicked for me yet, but I also know it takes time to learn each Metroidvania's tricks and tap into the flow of its unique layout and mechanics.
To confront the all-powerful Harmonia once more, her powers needed sharpening.
Considering how enjoyable the game's combat and mobility can be overall, I'm looking forward to finding that flow in Somber Echoes and seeing what dangers lie ahead in the Atromatos, and I'm feeling fairly confident that I'll be able to do so, because while there's already a lot to love about it even in its pre-alpha stage, the team will be making improvements and adjustments that are certain to only elevate what's already shaping up to be an overall exciting Metroidvania romp. I guess we'll find out for sure when it launches later this fall.
The source of all this misery and pain? Meddling and foolish mortals.
For more on Somber Echoes, don't miss the announcement trailer from earlier this year, and for everything else in the world of video games, stick with IGN.